Mr. Prime Minister, good to see you. 1 year later, you were the opening guest here just over a year ago. The war has endured between Russia and Ukraine, with many tense moments in between. Viktor Orban sat in this seat yesterday. He said there is no victory for Ukraine in this war. Do you agree? No victory for Ukraine, no winner in Ukraine in this war. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Thank you very much. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me. I want to express my gratitude to His Highness, the Mayor of the State of Qatar, for inviting me to participate in this forum. And I thank you for having me. It is indeed a very difficult time. Europe hasn't seen such a huge challenge after the Second World War. And therefore, this war affects all of us. But let me also remind you that Georgia had a war in 2008. And we know exactly what it means. To answer to your question, let me remind all of you that since this war started, we know that today, approximately 20% of Ukrainian territory is occupied by Russia, right? This is the status quo of today. What will happen tomorrow? I don't know, I can say. I think nobody knows.
But are you surprised that we have not had, are you surprised it has endured for so long and there is no sign of an off-ramp right now?
I think everybody was surprised. And unfortunately, we don't see any sign that this war is going to end soon. This is the problem. But, and I also have to say that we don't see enough efforts from the international community to take proper measures, to encourage consultations, to encourage peace talks.
Who needs to move the most?
War.
Who needs to make the big move to drive some kind of a peace bargain?
I think everybody, both sides.
1 year ago, you made it clear about sanctions. I know you have a standard response about why you have not adopted sanctions. We have that verbatim. I want to move the conversation forward. How much is that stance of not adopting sanctions hurting you with Brussels and the EU? Because you have ambitions for EU membership. Are you now injuring Georgia by not adopting these sanctions?
We would not only injure Georgia, but we would destroy our economy, we would damage the interests of our country, and we would damage the interests of our people if we impose some kind of economic sanctions on Russia. But let me go back to where I started. You know it well. We had a war in 2008. And do you remember if anyone imposed sanctions on Russia because of our war? No one. No one in the world made proper reaction, and I would say adequate reaction to that war. So my question is, where's the logic? Our war is not a war, and Ukrainian war is a war? Well, I have to say that we were quite disappointed that business as usual continued with Russia after 2008 war. The result of that war, devastating war, is that 20% of our territory is occupied by Russia. Russia built 2 military bases on our historic lands. Russia recognized the so-called independence of our historic regions. And this occupation is ongoing. So my question to our European, to our American friends is the following. My dear friends, you continued business as usual with Russia. No one imposed sanctions on Russia. For your information, and for the information of our audience, European Union paid $2.5 trillion between 2008 and 2022 to Russia. No one stopped the business. Nothing happened. Well, in this situation, let me once again confirm that we support Ukraine. We support Ukrainian people, and we want this war to end as soon as possible. We joined more than 500 resolutions, statements, everywhere, at every international platform. And we fully comply with the financial sanctions. US State Department officially declared that Georgian financial institutions, National Bank, fully comply with the financial sanctions. But when it comes to economic sanctions, let me explain to public and to you that Georgia's trade turnover with Russia is less than $1 billion. Less than $1 billion. It's, just for comparison, what EU trades with Russia in 4 days, we trade with Russia in 1 year. This is ridiculous, isn't it? That $1 billion could not affect Russian economy. This is 0.3% if we would impose economic sanctions on Russia. So there's no logic. This would, again, destroy, harm national interests of my country.
But as the leader of a nation, you must judge the risk and the reward by not adopting these sanctions. So you look out and you see Moldova and Ukraine being offered candidate status. You've not reached that threshold. And to me, and to some of the people I speak to, they say this is the injury, that this is where it comes to bear. They are further ahead than you in their EU ambitions, okay? You've not been given that. And part of that, people say to me, is because of the status that you've taken over Ukraine. This is the injury.
Well, let me explain to you. So if we make judgments based on the performance of the countries, of the nations, I don't want to compare ourselves to Moldova or to Ukraine, but we are ahead of Ukraine and Moldova 2-3 times. If we're talking about the merit-based approach, and if we're talking about the performance. Now, Georgia is extremely in a difficult situation, right? Because of our geography, because of the ongoing occupation. Again, 20% of our territory is occupied. So let me ask you then, what else could Georgia do to support Ukraine people? I didn't want to talk about this, but...
and I hadn't got it down on my schedule either. I know that you condemn aggression, and you've been very, very clear on that.
Absolutely.
But
maybe the Ukrainian friends had different expectations from us. They publicly, I have to say it, said that they want to see a second front in Georgia. We've had enough wars after Georgia regained independence. In the 90s, we had 2 wars. We had civil war, then we had a war in 2008 with Russia. A small nation with 4 million population and 40,000 troops had a direct war with Russia.
So there's nothing would make you move from the no military aid to Ukraine position?
What we're doing is that we have maintained secured peace and stability. This is the most important thing. And my job and my duty is to protect the national interests of my country, is to protect our people.
So do you put... So the 2 biggest ambitions, one of them is enshrined in your constitution, but the 2 ambitions are EU membership and NATO membership. Are they both, Manis, these are still my absolute priority. I want to maintain this quasi-neutrality, but I am holding on that I will get EU membership and I will get NATO membership. How high do they rank for you?
Manis, my friend, this is my interest to do the maximum to bring my country closer to EU and NATO. And let me just also remind you, if anybody in Georgia did something tangible and brought tangible results, this is my government, this is the political party which I represent. In the last decade, we did the maximum we could. We signed the association agreement, free trade, we got the visa-free, European perspective. We couldn't have imagined about this 10 years ago. The country was driving in a totally different direction. So, and this was our decision to put into the constitution the country's foreign policy orientation is EU and NATO.
But then I look at the most recent events in the past couple of weeks where Putin has lifted a flight ban. I know that some people have protested against this. Right. They perhaps see it as a rapprochement. I mean, it is a strange thing to see flights and the number of flights from Russia to to your country. Is this a rapprochement? How would you describe it today to the international community here?
Well, this is part of the economic trade relationship with Russia, right? As I explained in the beginning, we didn't say that we would stop the economic trade relations with Russia. So you mentioned flights.
Yes.
Many countries have flights with Russia, but we made it very clear that no sanctioned companies and no sanctioned aircrafts will be allowed to operate in Georgia.
And you feel strong that you can maintain that, guard against that?
Absolutely, absolutely.
The US State Department then said, now is not the time for any country to increase their engagement with Russia. This is the US. Are you just annoying friends? Is these flights, could you live without them? Do you think it's worth the error of the United States State Department to make this kind of statement?
Well, first of all, America is a very important strategic partner country for Georgia. And we are extremely grateful for everything America has done for us. And we are extremely grateful for Europe as well. Georgia has a sovereign right to have its own national interests. And as I explained, we have economic trade relations with Russia. We have 1 million Georgians, ethnic Georgians, our citizens, diaspora, who live in Russia.
Yep.
And to have direct flights with Russia, I think it's very normal, very normal. Plus, it doesn't mean that we're engaged in some kind of political consultation or something like that. As I said, this is part of the economic trade relationship, like European Union does, like America does.
Do you not think it plays to Putin's...
still trade with Russia.
Do you not think it plays to Putin's narrative where he then has this quasi-relationship with you, albeit just by flights?
I wouldn't call it a quasi-relationship. It's a very normal, let's say, economic trade relationship.
Time is always running down on the clock, and there are some other topics I want to touch on. The former president that set you on this course to EU membership and NATO, he remains in prison. It is Mikhail Saakashvili. The EU have urged you to release him on health grounds. Why have you not done that?
I really didn't want to talk about former president because it's the past. And we're talking about the present, about the future. I think this is more interesting for us and for the audience. But since you asked, I will answer your question very shortly. Former President Saakashvili made big mistakes and committed grave crimes. That is why he's not in prison. He's in private clinic. He's been in private clinic for more than 1 year. And there has been lots of speculations, lots of fake news, disinformation around the world. His family has been spending millions of dollars the last 2 years, accusing the Georgian government for poisoning him, for torturing him, and this and that. And guess what happened 2 weeks ago? They took the case to the Strasbourg Court of Human Rights. Strasbourg Court of Human Rights rejected all his requests and confirmed once again what we have been trying to explain to everyone, that the Georgian government does care for his health conditions and treat him according to the European standards.
Do you see a risk? You're the leader of the country and you've got to assess risk and reward as the Prime Minister. If Saakashvili passes away, he's ill, if he dies in the clinic, not in prison as you've just clarified for me, do you think that could be injurious to your EU accession ambitions?
Well, listen, I don't want to comment on that. I wish every citizen, every prisoner, long life. And what I can tell you is that we protect the rights of every individual, every citizen, including every prisoner.
Finally, to close, China-US relations are tense at the moment on the trade front. You have this trade relationship with Russia and China. Is it open-ended, unbounded? Is there anything in terms of what China does that would restrict you from progressing that relationship in regards to human rights, in regards to any of the issues that have caused perhaps America to be a little bit more restrained in their relationship towards China, publicly?
With China, we have very good relationship. We have free trade agreement with China, and we do increase trade, economic ties with China. What China has been trying to do during this crisis, I think this is a pretty wise move, because China has been trying to mediate between Ukraine and Russia. And I would welcome, and I would really welcome all the efforts from any country, from any leader who would encourage peace talks, who would mediate negotiations, and who would try to do something, make some efforts to.
So you're behind the China initiative. You're behind China's initiative.
I'm generally pro-peace. I'm pro-stability, and I'm pro-negotiations.
Prime Minister of Georgia, Irakli Garibashvilli, thank you very much for joining me on stage,
Thanks
sir.
so much. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.